Virginia State Police declared a local emergency in Charlottesville, Virginia, Saturday. This is after violent protests broke out at what was supposed to be a white nationalist rally. The rally was planned in response to city officials' plans to take down a statue of General Robert E. Lee. CBS News Justice reporter Paula Reed has been tracking this story from Charlottesville. Paula, this protest took place
Rena, we're here in an increasingly tense situation here in Charlottesville, Virginia. They were expecting several thousand protesters, and they all showed up. But Rena, what we're seeing now is the police have finally arrived on the scene. For a while, the police had vacated the premises. They said that this was not a safe situation, and they left. Now they have returned to the park. You can probably see them behind me, and they are attempting to clear the scene. They have brought tactical vehicles, they have shields, and they're working to clear Emancipation Park. That is right over my shoulder. Now, most of the protesters have left the scene, but they're now right outside the park. So you're seeing a group of white nationalists, you're seeing Black Lives Matter, you have some representatives of the KKK, many people also who want to celebrate Confederate history, all here in the same square. It is an increasingly tense situation, but right now the police are just trying to clear the area.
All right, Paula, please stay safe out there. We're going to continue to follow you throughout the day with the latest reports. Justice reporter Paula Reed. Joining me now on the phone to discuss this further is Heidi Beirich, the Director of Intelligence for the Southern Poverty Law Center. Heidi, we are seeing the escalation in many instances of what Paula is saying on the ground the past few hours. What are you most concerned about?
Well, obviously, some kind of full-scale violence, worse than what we've already seen already. There have been injuries and other problems, and I just hope that this doesn't escalate anymore.
Your organization has been monitoring this very closely, Heidi. How long would you say that there's been this rise of this white nationalist movement, and why is it getting what feels like sort of renewed support?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, the number of hate groups in this country have been rising for some time, and online activism is really huge in white supremacist circles. I'd say one of the main reasons that these folks feel so emboldened right now has a lot to do with the Trump campaign and the new administration that they feel endorses their views. And they have moved from sort of online activism to real-world activism like we're seeing today in Charlottesville as a result of feeling empowered in this way.
We know the city of Charlottesville has declared an emergency. They're asking people to leave this park. They're saying it's now an unlawful assembly. But as you know, when people are congregated in these large masses, it's incredibly hard to get the crowd to break away. Where do you see this headed?
I mean, look, it doesn't look good right now from the television images. And a lot of the folks that we monitor on the radical right are being extremely aggressive. They have been for days now, about their language in terms of the fact that they were going to go to the park, they were not going to get removed from the park. And, you know, the actions last night where they surrounded counter-protesters were very dangerous. So I really, really hope that this is dispersed somehow quickly before some serious violence breaks out.
You've been monitoring the situation, Heidi. What's your biggest concern across America right now as this group rises?
Well, I mean, just the fact that we have an active, engaged, emboldened white supremacist movement is frightening. You know, the legacy of these ideas, these kinds of hateful ideas, is one of domestic terrorism and hate crimes. And these are the wrong people to feel like their time has come. And so that's a very, very big concern for the Southern Poverty Law Center.
This rally, it's called Unite the Right. It was convened by these white nationalists because they oppose the moving of a statue of Robert E. Lee, a Confederate general. What do you say to people who say they obviously have their own First Amendment rights and there should be a space for them to be able to protest and be there?
Sure. I mean, they do have their First Amendment rights to be able to say what they want to say. But, of course, this also has to be done in a peaceful manner, right? I mean, that's the key to us exercising our First Amendment rights, and that's not what's happening right here. And I would just say in general as well that counter-protesters don't help these situations. They inflame them, and they give oxygen to this fire. And so you get this kind of a terrible situation like we see happening right now in Charlottesville.
Have you been in touch with the White House at all, Heidi, in the past few months about this particular issue?
You know, we are extremely frustrated by the fact that the White House has shown basically no interest in the issues of hate crime, in the issues of white supremacist violence. This just doesn't seem to be something that they ever comment on. When we have domestic terrorist attacks like happened in Portland a few weeks ago, we get no response from the Trump White House. You know, so we would hope that the administration would understand what a threat this is and take it seriously. But so far, there's been none of that.
Paula, Heidi was mentioning the rise of these hate crimes and this type of talk. You cover the Justice Department. What are they saying in the Justice Department about this issue in particular?
Well, they have not been quite as aggressive in terms of prosecuting police use of force, those kinds of issues. And we've seen some hate crime prosecutions. Many of them were sort of in the pipe before Jeff Sessions took over the Justice Department. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, he has certainly denounced any type of hate crime against anyone, Muslims, African Americans, women, LGBT people. But it has not been quite as active or as aggressive a civil rights division under the new Attorney General as it was under Attorney General Lynch, as it was under Attorney General Eric Holder.
If you're joining us now, we're monitoring the protest out in Charlottesville, Virginia, just around the University of Virginia. This is where white nationalists are now clashing with counter-protesters in this area, all over the removal of a Confederate General, Robert E. Lee, a statue that was in this area. Paula Reed is on the ground there. Paula, what more can you tell us about the police presence there? We haven't seen a lot of it on the camera screens here.
Yes, well, the police have finally arrived at Emancipation Park. They were here when we got here early this morning, but we noticed that a conspicuous absence of police as demonstrators were dispersing tear gas, pepper spray, throwing projectiles at each other. But now we have seen a full force of police, a very thick, large blue line, along with tactical vehicles, has arrived here at Emancipation Park. You can probably hear it over me. They are asking people to evacuate the area. They have declared it unsafe. The overwhelming majority of protesters have left the area, but there are probably about 100 protesters where I am. I'm still staying here, standing their ground, being peaceful for the most part, but certainly being vocal.
So, Paula, you're saying the police are now clearing the area there. Do you notice that is the crowd dispensing now that police say this is an unlawful protest?
They have left the park. It's a square park with main roads surrounding it. But what has happened is the protesters have left the park, and they are now marching up the street with Confederate flags. The same group, it looks like they got together, and now they are marching up the road. The question is whether or not, Rena, they are going to try to take back the park, because they're marching towards a corner entrance of the park. So right now they're rounding the corner. I don't know if you can see it, but they're rounding a corner where they will have the opportunity to try to take back the park, or they can keep walking through Charlottesville. So far, it appears they want to just march through Charlottesville, and they will not attempt to take back Emancipation Park from the police.
We do see them marching right now. That's the image you see on your screen. The white shields that they're carrying are part of what these white nationalists are carrying, just to clarify. But just a few seconds ago, the image, as Paula was talking, of the police in black uniforms, that was actually the police, is my understanding. They were completely lined down that row as the march there appeared to be much more calm and not as violent. I want to bring in Heidi as well from the Southern Poverty Law Center. Heidi, what has your organization been doing to counter this message?
Sure. I mean, one of the main things is just informing the public of how many of these folks there are, what they believe, that their ranks are growing, and the impact that they're having, not just in terms of what we're seeing today in Charlottesville, but their support for policies that are against sort of hate crimes prosecutions and whatnot. Also, this aggressive rhetoric about race is in the public domain in a way that it hasn't been in decades, and that's another thing that we've been documenting extensively.
Heidi, did you think that these protests would get this violent today?
Sad to say I did. I mean, we have been warning law enforcement for the last week or so and providing them information about this, because this is the kind of scene that we were expecting. And it's not just about the white supremacists, it's also about some of the counter-protesters.
It's interesting to say you've been warning the police, but I think one of the big questions many people are asking is, where are the police? The images we've seen, the reporting on the ground, are Paula Reed, people on social media are talking about the lack of police presence. Do you see this going to a federal level? Like, will they call for more state resources instead of just local resources, or are there state resources there today?
You know, that's a really good question, and I'm not exactly sure what the strategy was in terms of law enforcement here. Usually the best way to handle these kinds of extremist rallies is to have a heavy police presence and to separate counter-protesters from protesters. It's when they get close that things get out of hand. So I'm not exactly sure why they involved the tactics that they did, because these situations get out of control all the time.
We're following the protests here by white nationalists at the university, just outside the University of Virginia. They were in an area known as Emancipation Square. They are protesting the removal of Robert E. Lee, a statue of Robert E. Lee, the Confederate general that was to come down. And their counter-protest to counter the white nationalists there. Heidi, who joins us from the Southern Poverty Law Center, you've been monitoring the stats on all of this, the rise of the white nationalist movement. What concerns you? What troubles you the most about this?
Well, I mean, look, there's the basics, domestic terrorism, which we've actually seen a lot of from people who share the kinds of beliefs as the folks at Charlottesville. There was the attack in Portland. There was a black student killed in Bowie, Maryland, for example. There was a neo-Nazi cell that had weapons set up to blow up Jewish synagogues. I mean, all these things are happening. Then there's the rash of hate crimes we've experienced since the election, which are often influenced by racist ideas, the perpetrators are. So violence is the big thing. And the second thing is, you know, when these kinds of ideas, extremist ideas, get normalized, and that's a very terrifying prospect.
When you talk about the white nationalist movement, I think people sort of have images in their head, but what can you tell us about their numbers? How active are they? Are there pockets in this country where they're more active?
Well, unfortunately, you can find people with these beliefs all over the country. And, you know, there's more than 900 of these kinds of extremist organizations across the country, according to our count. Perhaps what's a little more scary is some of these websites, including one, Daily Stormer, that has representatives in Charlottesville, gets more than 400,000 readers a month for articles that are basically neo-Nazi. So the spread of these ideas across the United States, and especially through the web, is frightening.
We're continuing to monitor the white nationalist protests near the University of Virginia. We're now getting word that Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe has declared a state of emergency as the Unite the Right rally is happening in Charlottesville, Virginia. Now that you've heard McAuliffe declare an emergency, what does that mean, Heidi, as far as resources and police mean?
Well, I would assume that means that the resources just went up and the ability to disperse these people has also increased. So hopefully we'll see that, because we just don't need any more of this, you know, possibility for violence breaking out in Charlottesville. I'm sure for people on the ground there, for the folks that live there, this is a really scary situation.
We have yet to hear from the President of the United States about this rally taking place right now. Heidi, do you anticipate we'll hear from him?
Well, given the fact that President Trump has been so reluctant to denounce the kinds of ideas these people espouse, I doubt we'll hear from him. It would be a welcome thing if we did. I mean, Orrin Hatch this morning, the senator from Utah, denounced the rally, as have officials in Virginia and others. And it would be really nice to hear Trump say something about how these ideas are heinous and opposed to American democratic ideals and civil rights. But that is one thing that he has been very reluctant to do since he took up office.
Why do you think he's been so reluctant, Heidi?
I think, unfortunately, part of that has to do with the fact that he appealed to these kinds of people. You know, we have to remember that Steve Bannon's, news service, Breitbart, called itself a platform for the alt-right. Well, the people that you see on your television screens in Charlottesville are members of the alt-right. Trump's racist comments about Mexicans, his comments about Muslims, they appeal to these kinds of people that have been causing these problems in Charlottesville today. And, you know, the president has just not been willing to sever his relationship to people who think like that.
I want to bring in our Paula Reed, who's on the ground there reporting for us. Paula, you mentioned one of the concerns was that these marchers who are leaving, who have been asked to leave by police Emancipation Square, that they might turn violent or possibly go to reclaim the park. We did see some people in a parking garage throwing things, sort of a moment of violence. What are you seeing on the ground?
Right now we're seeing the police. They have formed a line here outside the park, and they're slowly walking back. Everyone, including us, they are walking us all back away from the park. What's interesting is behind me there's a few just residents of Charlottesville who are thanking them, waving at the police, saying thank you for your service. I think we're going to get cleared out of here momentarily, but they're being pretty patient with me. But it's nice. They're getting actually a lot of support. So far, the protesters have completely cleared the area. The police are walking down the street, and from local residents getting some nice words from protesters, a few not so nice words.
Paula, you spoke to the mayor this morning. What did the mayor say to you?
I'm sorry, Rena, I couldn't quite hear you over the police.
Sure. No, I know it's very loud where you're at, Paula. You spoke to the mayor this morning. What did the mayor say?
The mayor said that Charlottesville is a great city. He understands that this has become sort of a hotbed of far right-wing activity because they tried to remove a statue of Robert E. Lee. Now, the courts have paused that, but he said, look, this is democracy. It's messy. and he said he would not do anything to stop people from protesting. But the police have declared this situation unsafe and are clearing the area. There's probably about 100 straggler protests, but the thousands or so people we saw earlier today, Rena, they have all cleared the scene.
What did the police give you? Did the mayor give you any sense of what the police plan might be, and if he felt confident in that plan?
I did when I heard it at 9 o'clock this morning, but we were told there would be a very heavy police presence. That's what we saw 6 weeks ago with the KKK. It was very organized. They had a very, very heavy presence, probably 5 police officers for every member of the KKK. But today, as we reported throughout the day on CBSN, we didn't see any police. We saw a few when we came, and then they disappeared. We're now told that the police declared the situation unsafe. They left the scene, and now we have the police and the National Guard in full tactical gear, sweeping the entire scene, evacuating the area, covered with trash. But for the most part, the streets are clear of protesters around the park.
Our Paula Reed reporting on the ground. Paula, please, we hope you and the crew stay safe. We're going to come to you throughout the day as it warrants. And we're getting word that the University of Virginia is also closed. I want to thank Heidi as well from the Southern Poverty Law Center. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.